one of the things that really stuck out to me at the ending of your book, in the conclusion, is you mentioned how the nature of the legal codes in the Hebrew Bible with regards to slavery, and um and also inferring too from like what you wrote in context, I assume would apply to other sanctions and commands given by Yahweh to the ancient Israelites, that the nature of these codes was not meant to be stopped. They were meant to be eternal. Is that an accurate like assessment of what you're saying? And I understand there's a history of obviously interpretation and so forth, but just at least in the original historical critical context of the Hebrew Bible, are all these laws about slavery and the treatment of them and as property, and also all the various laws, whether it's like Leviticus 25, inheritance and so forth, and beating of slaves, is there any indication at all that that is only going to be temporary, as is often like argued by apologists?
No, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? When someone says theological framework or
Mm-hmm.
different, traditional interpretations, sure.
Mm-hmm.
When if you're taking second Esdras into account when you're looking at the book of
Right.
Daniel, then you're going to be it's very easy to say, oh, well, Greece wasn't supposed to be the fourth kingdom. It's actually supposed to be Rome. Well, and if somebody says, well, look, here in the book of Daniel, you could be like, yeah, but look in the book of Esdras, it says he didn't have all the information, right? And so here's who it actually is, actually Rome. So if one is taking Ezekiel into account, right? If one is taking the New Testament into account, then yeah, like there are things, if people are taking Jeremiah 31 into account, right, in this interpretive framework, then sure, like you can say, yeah, but new covenant coming, right? And we've got,
Mm-hmm.
look here at what foreigners, how they're going to be brought in. See, like all this. The problem is that I'm not engaging with the text as if it were univocal. And this is required for this interpretive framework, is this type of univocality, that there is one overarching author to all of this, which is God. And I'm not viewing the text that way. That's not an academic approach to the text, at least from a critical historical view. And that's what we're talking about. So if you go back and read through the book of Leviticus or Deuteronomy, and you see these are to be eternal statutes throughout all your generations, there's not a notion that this happened for a while, then go away, right? Like that's not there. Um, and so I think that for people that are trying to make this argument that God gave these laws through Moses in such a way that later he could come back and say, like in Matthew 19, yeah, I let you do that through Moses, but it was because you guys were bad. And, I couldn't, or I didn't just stop you from doing it, but it was because of the hardness of your hearts that happened. If you're coming at the text from that perspective, yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. I still think you have hurdles, right? Cliff, I said this to Cliff when we had that debate. Like, Cliff, you can't just cite Matthew 19 and then like step back and drop your microphone. It doesn't work that way. I mean, the most that you've done here is connect it to divorce in Deuteronomy 24, right? But even then, and this is the great irony of the Matthew 19 argument, sorry, but Jesus doesn't say you can't divorce. Right? He doesn't like stop the issue of divorce in Matthew 19. It's still allowable. It's restricted, but it's still allowable. So what's the argument here? Like if we're trying to connect this to slavery, it's like, okay, so what? Slavery's still allowable? You just have to do it right? Like, I don't, is sick flex, bruh. you know? So anyway, I think the big problem here is that these laws in the Hebrew Bible, these law collections, were seen by their writers as in their particular context, things that were to be carried out in perpetuity. And so I
Mm.
think having this later argument where we're trying to say that was bad, but God allowed it temporarily, and so we're finding later texts to sort of speak to that doesn't engage honestly. That's equivocation in my opinion, because we're not coming at the text utilizing the same interpretive framework.
Yeah, yeah.